Good Monday morning. I am so tickled that it is a beautiful day. Sun is out. It may be chilly out there, too chilly to go outside with my ukulele, but it's a good day. And I didn't actually sleep all that great. For some reason, I had some aches and pains. So here's a cancer tip: stay away from sugar. I knew, and I ate even just a half of that cookie last night that I picked up somewhere at a church get-together. Macadamia nut and those white chocolate chips, I think, that were in there. Oh my goodness, they taste so good, and I hadn't had one for a long time, so I cheated and ate a half of one. I ate it like a quarter, and then I ate the other quarter before I went to bed. And I'm telling you, I should have slept because we've been given extra time, right? But my legs ached, my joints ached. Even though I went to bed with a nice heated rice bag, I had to end up getting up so many times in the night and reheated the bag. Took some Tylenol, which I don't like to take much of that stuff because, you know, they always say it hurts your liver if you take too much, so I don't. But sometimes when I'm desperate, I do. So I hope you had a good weekend, a good last week. Mine was full of ups and downs as usual. I started my physical therapy for my joints last Monday. And oh my goodness, what a blessing it was to find other Christians there and connections and believers. And we just had good conversations. So it, as often happens, God blessed me physically and spiritually. But Wednesday and Thursday, I was so sore from the therapy that I could hardly walk, and I didn't end up going to my ukulele group on Thursday night. So I felt bad about that, but I gradually started to get better on Friday. And so had a good weekend, had a good Bible study with my friend on Friday, and went shopping together. And so holidays are in the air, the fun of all of that, and gatherings. So good times. Now, I wanted to resume our meditation on the fear of the Lord. Remember, before my last post, I talked about that, the fear of the Lord, and that it's the beginning of wisdom. And wisdom is to hate evil. How do we be wise? How do we please God? Well, He wants us to hate evil. He wants us to see. But it doesn't stop there. The whole Old Testament, the law, the sacrificial system, the 10 Commandments, all of that was given to teach us that we can't keep all that. It's to teach us how wicked our natures are in comparison to God. We fall short, don't we? And as one of the prophets said, "Woe is me, for I am undone," when he got a vision of the holiness of God. Well, I wanted to share a couple of things with you, especially Psalm 34. And the word fears is mentioned 5 or 6 times in this psalm, either in a good way or a bad way. So verse 4 says, "I sought the Lord, and He heard me and delivered me from all my fears." And then jumping down to verse 7, "The angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear Him and delivers them." Verse 8, "O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in Him. Oh, fear the Lord, you His saints. There's no want or lack to those who fear Him. The young lions lack and suffer hunger, but those who seek the Lord shall not lack any good thing." And then one more, "Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord." Well, I got to go on to verse 12 and 13, maybe 14 too. "Who is the man who desires life and loves many days, that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. We all can agree that the better we are, the better off we all are. It affects everyone. Our lives will be better as we control our tongues and seek peace with each other and pursue it. But as I said, all of this, the law, the rules, as we get to know God and His holiness, all of that is a teacher to drive us to our knees and help us cry out to God and say, I cannot do this on my own. Who of us can say, I'm perfect? No, we cannot. We cannot attain to the holiness of God. So do we just throw up our hands and say, well, I'm just gonna do the best I can, and then when I get to heaven, maybe my good will outweigh my bad, and I'm a pretty good person, and I try, and I have many friends who, they're good people, but they don't know the Lord. As far as I know, they haven't surrendered. Anytime conversation gets a little closer to that, the door is kind of closed, so that's all right. I respect that. But oh, how I want all of you. I think probably most of you who listen to my posts are Christians, but maybe some of you aren't. Maybe some of you are just curious observers and have known me in some way outside of the church and just kind of interested to hear what I have to say. Well, God love you. I pray that anything I say would be a help to both those of you who are Christians and those who haven't taken that step and don't really see a need to. But I want to now take you to Amazing Grace. I heard it played once again this past week at a football game in Lewiston as these two teams came together and marched in to the tune of Amazing Grace being played. And then one of my favorite singers, James Taylor, sang it with a guitar so simply and sweetly. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Well, I don't know how many of you know who wrote that. John Newton did. And I have a booklet, and I've heard that before, but I love how this brings out certain interesting facts about John Newton. And I won't take the time to get into all of it, but how many of you know that he was a slave ship runner? He was raised in a Christian home, but he went to sea at about the age of 11. He went to sea with his father, and he loved it, and he turned from the faith and turned from a way of living rightly and lived lustily and lived a terribly sinful life. And one of those sins was in being in the slave trade. Then one day, I want to read this part to you. It says, the depravity of his life came crashing down like a wave upon his shoulders as he found himself and his ship caught in a violent storm at sea that fateful day in 1748. The monstrous waves smashed against the timbers of his imperiled vessel, and the debaucherous Newton found himself facing the grim reality of death. Remembering his early ecclesiastical training, Newton thought of himself as another Jonah, caught in the maw of the ocean as Jonah had been caught in the belly of the great fish. Perhaps, he reasoned, this storm had been sent from God to redirect his life, as Jonah's had been centuries before. The close brush with death transformed Newton over a period of the next few years. It was a book he found on board, Thomas à Kempis' Imitation of Christ, which sowed the seeds of his conversion. Okay, so eventually he realized his sin of the slave trade, and it says that he came to loathe it, and he was sickened by his own spiritual state and the filthy business he found himself in. He rededicated himself to the ministry, and then he was married and eventually wrote the song Amazing Grace. Now, I will sing the first verse and the second. The second one I want you to listen to closely as he talks about fear. And think about him having that fear that drove him to God, not away, but drove him to God. And then by grace, his fears were relieved. So then I want to end with a verse that isn't often sung. It's not published in the usual places where the hymn is found. And it talks about the end, whether knowing that you're getting older and the end could be any time. Well, we need to understand the end could be any time. And the end of the world could be any time. We don't know. Things are getting pretty bad. They're ramping up. But we don't know, and we shouldn't as Christians claim. And if you hear any prophets that say, okay, all of this thing is working and Jesus is coming back and the end of the world is right around the corner and we know it for sure, and we know what date it is and all that, that is wrong. We do not know. Only God knows. And our responsibility is to be faithful, to speak the gospel, to live the gospel, and do what he wants us to do in the last days. Okay, I'm going to sing Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Okay, and I just mixed up the first verse and the second together. Okay, and I'm not going to go back and correct it. I just want to sing verse 2 to you. I'm sorry. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine, will be forever mine. So when we fear the Lord in the right way, he will deliver us from all our fears. Have a good week.